this week's webinar slash collab, attorney collab, powered by Visas.ai, the intelligent immigration platform. I'm Pierre, and I'm very, very happy to be joined by two wonderful professionals, two immigration attorneys that I look up to, and I love their perspective on the world and how you guys simplify really complicated things. Thanks for being here with us. Before I let you introduce yourselves, I'm going to get right into the topic of today's conversation. I think everyone is here for it. So, why don't we talk a little bit about the future of the US under the new Trump administration and what you see for immigration? There's a lot of fear. And as you know, fear is okay, it's part of change, but what can one do with an immigration attorney? And you guys are the superheroes in this situation. So I'll take it over and I'll give it to John if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we'll go over to Yesh.
John Veely, been an immigration attorney since 1993. This will be my second Trump administration to be an immigration attorney. And got some ideas on what we think might happen, but we don't know for sure. But thanks for the opportunity to talk about it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yesh, over to you. Would love to know a little bit about you.
Hi guys, my name is Yesh Srinivasam. I go by Yesh. This is going to be my first, I guess, Trump administration one as a practicing attorney. I was in law school when during his first term. A lot of my friends, a lot of my good friends have gone through the H-1B process, family members as well. So hands on, I've seen what some of the effects were, but I'm looking forward to today's discussion just to kind of see from an experienced perspective what you've seen before.
Excellent. Thank you, Yash. So I'm going to ask the question right on, John. Should we be scared, or is there an opportunity still for people to come to this country legally and have an opportunity here?
Well, immigration didn't go away under Trump. There are laws that permit people to come to this country, and I don't think Donald Trump or his administration is against all immigrants. He does use the term immigrants in that way, but I don't know that he means all immigrants. I think their first focus is going to be on securing the southern border. That's using their terms. I think what they've also promised is mass deportation. How many people I don't know? Is it a million? Is there can be somewhere between 11 and 30 million undocumented people in the United States, and I think there's some unintended consequences of a mass deportation. The biggest is it's going to take people out of the workforce, just from a practical matter of fact. I mean, we came out of COVID. There weren't enough workers. A couple of things have happened since um, that are continuing to happen. Number one, the baby boomers are aging out of the workforce. There's just less of them. They leave every day from being in high jobs to low jobs. They're just out, right? Then we had remote workers. We have gig jobs. We have all sorts of things that has changed the traditional workspace, and we just don't have enough people. We have a very, very low unemployment rate, which makes it interesting why immigration is such a negative word, and it is right now. It was one of
Yeah.
the major issues in the last election, and the one that the Trump administration ran on solving. Right, and they talk about deportation, and I'm not sure all of his voters agree with it, but his fans do, and I think there'll be some level of joy to deport people. Well, once they start getting into that, they're going to find that's a very negative thing. People are going to lose friends, family members, in-laws, restaurateurs. Restaurants are going to have a problem having enough people in their kitchen. Construction companies are going to have a problem completing their construction jobs. Crops are going to rot in the fields. Tech,
Wow.
enough people in tech if they start really going across all industries. And right now we're at a 3% unemployment, right? I mean, you start pulling people out, you can't get jobs done. If you can't get jobs done, then salaries will increase with the lesser number of workers we have, and prices will go up. So I don't think anybody that voted Trump in wants that. I think what most of them would say is we're against illegal immigration and we like legal immigration. Okay, that's not exactly how the Trump administration dealt with it last time. What we saw was a lot of illegal immigration handled much more negatively. We saw a big decrease in the approval rating of H-1Bs. We saw slower adjudication of cases. There's a couple things that will go on around that. The administration that's coming in is talking about slashing agencies. USCIS is an agency. The State Department is an agency. If you're slashing agencies, what does that mean? That means you're firing people and you're not rehiring people. And if there's less people to do immigration, it won't happen as fast. If there is a negative policy to be more restrictive on immigration, you'll have more denials, right? And so American companies that need to recruit worldwide across all different agencies are going to find it harder as they did last time to employ people. They're going to find more inconsistent decisions. They're going to find slower decisions, and they're going to think things are held up. Also, a lot of policies were implemented last time, and the Trump administration, unlike the Biden administration and every other administration, used, at least last time, and we'd assume we'll do it again, is presidential proclamations. What I mean by that is this is what we're doing. Here's our policy. Boom. Right? We enacted it today, and now it's what it is. Well, that's different than how the government typically works. The government typically works with having a projected or prospective new law that goes into place. And then once that law is out there, the stakeholders, which can be the American employers, committees that represent immigrants or whatever, lawyers like, Yesh and I, anybody can make notice and comment or make comments to the notice and comment process about what they would like to see when they look at this, and then they take that back and then they promulgate a law and then they file with the register, and now you have a new law. Okay, so that's different than here's our policy, boom, we're changing everything. Now when you have a policy, boom, here's how we change everything, like the Trump administration did last time, a lot of those got shot down because they didn't follow the right policy. Well, what's happened that's different this time? Well, the Trump administration will fill a lot of judicial gaps. So there'll be more judges that might follow along with Donald Trump's philosophies, right? They may not overturn him the way the previous administration's judges did. And they may allow him to do things that he wasn't allowed to do last time, right? And those may or may not be good or bad for whoever has a vested interest in them. But what we can see is there'll be a chilling effect. Now, one person that we need to pay attention to is Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller was a big part of the Trump administration last time around immigration. He has the game plan. He's a very interesting character. Stephen Miller is he's of Jewish descent, and his uncle was in a concentration camp, but he is a big proponent of negative immigration, right? Deportations and things like that, and has used a lot of racial rhetoric and things like that. He's actually proposing in the mass deportation using trains. That's how the Jews were rounded up and sent to the concentration camps, were on trains. So the deportation doesn't need trains, but using trains is a symbolic statement that would, that it's just going to rise the ire in America, and if that happens. So it's one thing deporting somebody because they're not lawfully here. It's another thing rounding them up and putting them on trains and sending them to another country in the same manner that people were exterminated during World War II. So it'll be interesting to see what the rhetoric is, what the mood's going to be in that. We've seen some policies around the H-1B to change that visa. The H-1B is a very, very important visa to America. It is the visa for college graduates. It is the white collar job visa. It's for all of us. It's lawyers, doctors, managers, techies, accountants, professionals, right? and there's not very many of them. There's only 65,000 a year that are allocated. There's now a lottery. Less than 30% of people, probably more like less than 20% of people get through the lottery. The Trump administration was ready to change the H-1B and make it more restrictive, and didn't get it through at the end of his last presidential campaign. Is he going to continue on that? I think our expectations would be that he would. So what does that mean? So changing the H-1B might be narrowing the types of jobs that you can get under the H-1B. It's called a specialty occupation. We saw the Trump administration narrow that. The Trump administration also really focused on the staffing companies. What are staffing companies? Well, they're companies that will get contracts with bigger companies and put 1099 consultants on a project, so they're not directly employees of, say, Amazon or Apple or whatever, but the staffing company will get a contract or through a vendor, usually to a bigger company, and then give them people for a short period of time. And what they do is they recruit them, pay for them to come over here, train them up, and then put them into these jobs. And then they're short stints, and they move them from project to project. That element is a lawful thing to do, and it's been very helpful to the tech economy to be able to have that, so that you don't have to go through all the employment processes to the others. But for whatever reason, USCIS, since prior to 2010, has really disliked that business model, even though it's completely lawful. And the Trump administration was even heightened on that model. And so we might see that. We might see an artificial raising of salaries. Right now, prevailing wage salaries are the salaries that you need to have to get a particular visa, like an H-1B or an H-2B or the perm green card. Those are based on the mean or average salary of a particular worker in a particular industry in a county in a state, right? So Los Angeles County would have a different prevailing wage than Oklahoma County, Oklahoma, right? And so if you artificially change that and you make it higher, and there's been all sorts of discussion, should we make it 100,000 or whatever? That's going to eliminate a lot of those jobs, right? And then legal pathways. So the interesting thing is, I don't think there's a lot of debate on the X's and O's of this. We've seen the X's and O's as immigration attorneys, but I don't think most Americans understand that. They just don't like illegal workers, and they're for legal workers. Well, if you make it harder to be a legal worker under immigration, you're going to have more illegal workers, because at the end of the day, the reason people are coming to this country is because there's jobs here. The reason there's jobs here is that we have a very, very low unemployment rate, and we have a white-hot economy, right? So the problem isn't we have a bunch of criminals coming into our country to steal from us. These people are coming to our country because there's jobs here that our companies need filled, right? And we're looking at it through such a negative lens, and the politics of this last election really, really impose that. So the Trump administration looks like it believes it has a mandate to solve this problem. I don't know that there's really a problem here, right? Not saying that there's not crime, but you can deal with crime by arresting criminals. You don't have to change immigration laws. You don't have to deport people that are not committing crimes. You could actually expand immigration solutions to people who were otherwise illegal. We've done it a bunch of times. We've used amnesties. Those were both Republican concepts. Ronald Reagan, George Bush, the first one, had these amnesties where anybody that could get a green card and got through that whole process could pay $1,000 fee and forgive them having been out of status or having worked illegally, as long as they didn't commit any other types of crimes, right? And that solved it. And for whatever reason, it turned negative after that, even though that was a good solution to make otherwise lawful people able to continue on in their work, right? There's other ways you can do that by having years that you have to have been here, things like that. But nobody's talking about common sense solutions to this. They're talking about rounding people up, putting them on trains, and sending them out of this country, right? And so those are the things that we see that the Trump administration appears to be likely to do.
Very well. Thank you for that, John. It's definitely a big thing to take in, a lot of information. I do want to ask you from an immigration attorney standpoint, you
Mhm.
know, you guys obviously have clients in your firm that are working on filing their O's and L's and EB-1s
Yeah.
and adjustment of status and marriage visas. Do we know for certain what are the facts as of now? Let's forget about 2016 and what happened in the other administration. What do we know now, and when do we know when these cases will be affected? As in, people listening right now that have immigration cases today.
Well, I think it should take some time to make a change no matter what it is, but the Trump administration likes to jump in and do things. So depending on how important it finds this issue or these different issues. Now, the immigration is such a big word. It covers so many different things, right? When I tell people I'm an immigration attorney, I don't think they know what that means many times, right? We don't really deal with a lot of people that have been here illegally. We help businesses uh, get visas for people that meet those qualifications, right? So immigration can mean asylum cases. There's a lot of asylum cases that people have come through the southern border. I think asylum cases should expect to be more difficult. There's already been a problem of not having enough asylum judges. I could see cutting there to make asylum, even if you don't change the law, more impractical, take longer to get, things like that. I'm not sure that we would see the U and V visa affected, but those are interesting visas that may come under scrutiny. The U visa is if you're a victim of a crime and to help, prosecutorial entities um, file cases or to prosecute people that do that. They want to give an immigration benefit for those victims to come forward. I don't know if those victims there'll be as much empathy for them. So if you have a U visa, file it now, right? Don't I wouldn't wait for that one to come up play because a couple of things could happen. Again, they could get rid of the U visa or they could just slow up the benefit so long that it's impractical. Um, those are the type of things. Asylum cases as well. Um, the H-1Bs, you can't just file H-1Bs whenever there's a cap coming up. So you have to wait and see what's going to happen with that. So will they change the H-1B in time for next year, which would be March? That's 4 months out. Tough to do that, right? But it depends on how much energy you want to put it. So I think the energy of the initial Trump administration is going to be around the southern border, getting more people, uh, you know, doing that, changing some things around it. Asylum allows you to enter the United States and stay here while your case is there. I think we saw the Trump administration come up with some different solutions of having to do your asylum from outside the United States. I assume that
Which I do have to say doesn't really make sense to me because isn't the whole, I mean, that's one of the things that does stand out. Isn't the whole point of asylum that you can't be there anymore? Yeah, I do
right,
have some
right,
friends in my
and
circle that have that situation where
yeah, and then you're
you
going to be
can't
asking.
physically be there.
Yeah, sorry, Pierre. And you're asking a third country to take care of somebody unless they're, a lot of these people coming from asylum are coming through Mexico in transit, right? They're coming from Guatemala. They're coming from around the world, actually, which is one of the big complaints the Trump administration and their voters have. Why are we taking care of them? Well, we're a nation of laws, and asylum has been a long time law. We seem to be at a time of change right now and how we're looking at everything. So, maybe asylum isn't going to be what it was or even exist. I don't know. That'll be an interesting way to look at it. That's that. The other ones with caps and things like that, the H-2B and the H-1B. The H-2B and H-2A are temporary worker visas. These are like either construction workers or laborers, or those are the H-2Bs. They're non-agricultural, and the H-2As are agricultural based ones. So we have a big need for them, and it'll be interesting to see what happens there, especially if we're going to deport a lot of that workforce that may be here and be determined to be illegal. And so can we do two things at once? Can we deport people here illegally, and can we expand these visa processes and raise these arbitrary numbers to allow companies to employ lawful people? That'd be a good solution. I'm not sure the Trump administration will go through those machinations. That would be, I would like if they would. I think that'd be good for us as practitioners to be able to put people into these lawful pathways. But
Yeah.
there's no indication that would or would not happen. There's no discussion points on that at this point. We're going to have to wait to see what they do. And that's what it was like last time. Policies changed, not with the typical way of here's what we're thinking about. What do you guys think? But this is what it is now. And so there's a lot more litigation. So we'll as immigration attorneys, we're probably going to have to do more litigation instead of just go through the procedural or administrative steps.
Yeah, the changes are really, really intense. I do recall back in 2017,
Mm.
I spent the first 15 years of my life becoming a citizen of Europe, of the Netherlands. And then the exact month that I booked my trip to the US, you guys know what the ESTA program is, right?
Yeah,
For
the visa waiver.
So I qualified for the ESTA program because I'm European. And then it got denied because of the Muslim ban.
Right.
And I was forced to go to a consulate and get a visa. So yes, I want to bring you into this conversation. I know that you didn't go through the first administration, but I'm sure you have an overview of, opinions, thoughts, and maybe questions even for the future. I know that you've helped and you continue to help a lot of folks come in to this country through, helping them with their cases. You work on a lot of H-1Bs. You already deal with a lot of RFEs and complicated cases, basically. What are your insights for the future? What do you feel?
So from what I'm hearing, from talking to John, Ashley, and the other attorneys, immigration attorneys that I know in our circle, they're pretty much saying there's going to be a lot of RFEs. Just kind of hunker down. This administration, we've seen the H-1Bs be given a little bit. Well, I guess for the full term or 3-year term, the terms that we ask during the previous administration, it wasn't as the terms weren't as lengthy. People were getting. I know one of my friends got a H-1B approval for 1 month. And so they were saying, expect that to be there, even if it's like H1s or Ls, other visa types expect a lot of scrutiny. There's also that fear of, or there's also that talk of getting rid of the U's and T visas completely, and then just having to solely rely on the S visa, which I've heard is the unicorn visa. But it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting time. I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there. A lot of people are kind of scared. But I think, it's not, I don't expect people to be, rounded up in mass deportation. I don't think that's going to happen. Fingers crossed. Although it might, I don't, but we'll see. But I mean, RFEs for sure. Expect a lot more scrutiny, a lot more work that's going to be cut out for us coming up. Pierre, you're muted.
You want mute, Pierre?
Oh, thank you guys. And really asking about the future, I think it's never been more important to obviously work with an attorney. But when it comes to these cases, John and Yesh, what do you feel would be a good game plan? Again, the reason why I brought the word fear is because there's a lot of uncertainty all the time, regardless of what administration. But I think now there's even more because there's this layer of quick changes.
Yeah.
However, does that mean that no legal professional, like let's say legal immigration for professionals, should they not contact you anymore? Should they look for another country, or should they continue
No,
to try?
not at all. Look, like I said, there was immigration that happened between 2016 and 2020. There will be visas that will go without issue or less issue, and visas, they'll have different types of issues, right? And it'll be interesting to see which ones. So if the H-1B has a tough time, which I think it will, I hope it doesn't, but it was on the chopping block. So those things can change depending on a lot of factors. But real good time to do the EB-5 green card, right? If you're stuck on that and you're on a long waiting list of H-1Bs, you don't know if you're going to get renewed. Pulling together money and investing in the EB-5 green card, I think that green card is going to be fine. I think the Trump administration, even his son-in-law Jared Kushner, was a big proponent of the EB-5, and it's for development. It's giving green cards for investment of $800,000 minimum into the United States and creating 10 jobs. I think that visa is going to be fine, and it's right now the only current green card for Indians and Chinese. So that might be a way to get out of the H-1B cycle and get a green card, is going to the EB-5. And these are the type of solutions that attorneys will be helping their clients understand. It's not going away. Immigration is not going to go away. But that's it. But what we saw last time is a chill on international students coming in, right? The F1, we saw about a 25% decrease of Chinese and Indians not going to American universities. I think that was an unintended consequence. I think the universities felt the pain of that. I think recipients of that were Canada. Canada says, okay, we'll just create a more open immigration solution. Come here, bring your tech companies here if they're going to be tough to be in the United States. American companies might move their branch offices to Canada and or Mexico. We've seen a lot of nearshoring is what they call that, or even South America or Caribbean islands, right? Any of those places might be locations if it's too difficult to do immigration, where we see that. Again, unintended circumstances are what comes out of big, broad policies to just be harder on immigration, if that's what's going to happen. And that's what happened last time. We got through it. We saw a decrease in approvals across the board. We saw more complicated and inconsistent decisions, more mean-spiritedness in the decision-making process, longer delays, but still plenty of visas and a business to do, and we're here to deal with it. There's a bit of a guessing game how they're going to adjudicate. I can remember those times saying, look, somebody telling me, what are my chances of this case? And I says, I don't know. These are different times. So, we do our best, and we try to watch what the changes are, try to read the tea leaves as they were, whether they're policies or whatever, more during the Trump administration than other administrations. There's always a bunch of laws potentially on the books, that are being promoted during all agendas or all administrations. But during the Trump administration, you got to pay attention to the White House policy procedures when they apply these things, because we need to know in this what's about to be a more changing world, how to keep representing our clients, right? And that's what it's going to be like, and we'll be ready for it because we've seen it before.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Any closing remarks from you, Yesh, as we wrap up this first session about this conversation?
This has been interesting, just because, I was in a different position during the first administration or during the first term. But it's definitely, just because you've been through one, you don't expect it to be the same for the second term, because it seems like, it may or may not be exactly.
Different factors that come into that, and you're absolutely right, Yesh. There's all sorts of different things that may trigger an administration to move one way or another on this issue. It's a political football. Trump's now elected, and he can't run for another term, so he's what you call a lame duck. He doesn't need to do everything he said he was going to do in order to get reelected, right? He can choose to do things or not do things, and can't do anything about it, right? So he may have run with a hard stance on something, and it might do. He also didn't give a lot of detail to what he was going to do, right? So because there's not a lot of detail, and you focus on what you want to focus on, and don't do that, or appease people with this and stuff like that. I think that obviously a lot of people are concerned about the southern border, and if he focused on that, there's not going to be a lot of complaints because honestly, the Biden administration tried to focus on it as well, and there was a bipartisan bill that was authored by Oklahoma Congressman Langford, who's a Republican, to solve that. And the Trump administrator, Trump said, "Don't pass it now," because essentially you're solving the problem that we're running on. Okay, so maybe they'll go in and they'll do that bill, which was acceptable enough. And as long as they just, in my opinion, remember these are people and they have human rights no matter what country they're from, or even if they're not American citizens, they should be treated well in this situation. Criminals should be convicted of crimes and then put in jail and taken out of society, but non-criminals should be handled, like people. And if they don't have a legal right to be here, then deportation is a law for a reason. And if they've broken that law, then that's going to happen. I think you'll see more prosecution of that. But they've also backed off on that a little bit. Are they going to focus just on people who have committed other crimes? Nobody has an argument with that. It's a little bit more gray when it's folks that the only crime they've committed is being here illegally. I think people break on that in different directions, even those who voted for Trump, and maybe even Trump himself. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how much energy's put towards that, how much focus, the money too. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a number like $800 billion to
I
enact.
saw that figure.
You're right. They enact this mass deportation. Who wants to spend that kind of money? And spending that type of money to deplete our workforce, right? What do we win out of this, right? I mean, if you're afraid of criminals, arrest criminals, right? Put more police to chase down criminals and lock them up and get them out. That doesn't mean you deport everybody that's in the United States that isn't authorized anymore.
And maybe you stop the problem by preventing it from happening further instead of taking people out that already entered. It's almost,
what about
put stricter rules.
What about creating a process to legitimize that? Right? Again, we've done it before, and it was a Republican agenda. So it was Ronald Reagan, and that was if you hadn't otherwise broken any other laws, and you can get an American company to pay for and sponsor you for a green card, and you get through all the vetting. When the vetting's significant, by the way, right? You have to do fingerprints. They have to make sure that you're not in a terrorist organization. You got to make sure you haven't committed any significant crimes. If you can get through all of that, and the only thing that you did was enter unlawfully, and then you can become lawful, then the issue is you're being a criminal just because you've committed a crime is where I think this thing breaks down on a intellectual level, right? Because if you speed, you've broken a law. Not all laws are the same. We have natural law, which is murder, arson. These are crimes, right? That are always crimes no matter what. And even if they're determined not to be crimes, like going back to Nazi Germany, right? We can kill Jews because they're Jews. That's still a natural crime. And that's why there were war crimes at the end of that war, even though it was lawful to do that, right? Those are natural crimes. Those people are criminals. Okay. Now, there are regulatory crimes. Regulatory crimes might be, filling out a document incorrectly, or there's a regulation and you're in violation of that regulation. That's what an immigration thing is, right? That is crossing in an arbitrary border that, a few years earlier was not the border. Those are different. They're not inherent natural crimes, right? So if somebody has committed a crime, such as I entered a country without permission, or I stayed too long, or I worked for Pizza Hut while I was in college, those crimes can be forgiven. Those crimes can be punished and then be okay. There's a number of different things you can do. So maybe the practical answer isn't to say anybody that has broken the law is going to be deported, but look at what that law is and then find pathways to legitimize these people, especially if they've been working for some significant amount of time. There's a number of different ways you could do that to come up to solutions to legitimize otherwise okay people. Now, why I say these things out loud is we saw a higher percentage of Hispanics vote for Trump than in the last election, right? So those are his voters, right? Some of these voters obviously are not illegal because you can't vote if you're not an American citizen, but their family members are, and people that they're co-working with, right? And people that are in their staff. And if you deport all of them, then they're out of a job because that company has now disappeared, right? There's a reason to try to find a reasonable solution. I pray for reasonableness. I don't know that I expect it, but reasonable solutions would be really cool. If we can look at this and that immigration is not a dirty word, and it's a needed pathway to fulfill jobs in America for the best economy in the world, that has a really low unemployment rate that needs workers, right? I think that if we start looking at it from that perspective, how do we make it easier to fill these jobs and then preclude people that are criminals, and I mean like bad people that are going to hurt Americans and others. That those should be that's a way to look at it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. I think this is going to be the first of many more sessions that we have. These webinars and attorney collabs are going to have a focus on anytime. Hopefully, there aren't many surprises. And I hope, I'm feeling hopeful. We have to hope that there's some positive to this in any way. We don't want all of what we're
Of
saying
course.
to come true because it will affect us. But I think we're going to have a lot more conversations like these as new laws and regulations, as more confusion or more good news hopefully comes out for us to break down to our viewers and then everyone that will be working with you guys' firm. I'd love to end with just one little note. If anyone is interested in having a one-on-one strategy session with these two wonderful attorneys and their teams, please reach out to vlielaw.com. That is VELIELAW.com. Or you can also email information@vlielaw.com. There's also another email, which is hello@onlinevisas.com. Everything will be in the description of this podcast episode or YouTube video. And with that being said, thank you so much for your time today.